Arya clutched $8 crumpled in her hand, standing beneath the flickering light of a rundown gas station on the edge of nowhere, her breath visible in the early dawn chill, her coat thin, her eyes heavier than her frame. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the ache in her stomach had been awake all night. This money wasn't just for breakfast. It was the only thing separating her from absolute rock bottom. She'd counted it 3 times already, each fold and wrinkle memorized, already imagining the stale breakfast sandwich and cheap coffee she could nurse at the diner just down the road. Somewhere to sit, to be warm, to feel normal for a moment. But then came the sound. The heavy thud of leather against concrete, the metallic clatter of a bike tipping sideways, and a groan that didn't sound drunk, just wrong. She turned, startled, and saw him, a massive biker, his skin pale and sweaty, clutching his chest beside his fallen Harley. The world around them didn't move. A couple in a pickup glanced and drove off. The cashier ducked behind the counter. Nobody came. Nobody cared. Except her. Arya stood frozen, heart pounding. Her first instinct screamed survival. Walk away. Get your food. Stay invisible. People like her didn't get involved. Not if they wanted to stay safe. Not if they wanted to survive. But then he gasped again, his eyes wild, and she saw it. Not a threat, not a monster, just a man on the edge of death. A human being who didn't deserve to die on cold concrete while strangers looked away. She looked down at the money. $8. Not enough for a full tank of gas, but maybe enough to help. She sprinted inside, grabbing the cashier's attention with trembling urgency. I need aspirin. And water. Please. She dumped the money on the counter before the man could protest. He's having a heart attack, I think. The cashier hesitated, glancing outside, then reluctantly passed her the items. Arya ran back, knelt beside the biker, slid her jacket under his head, and helped him chew the tablets, forcing sips of water between his shallow breaths. She remembered a YouTube video on heart attacks. Keep them talking. Keep them calm. Her hands shook, but she stayed. She whispered soft things, dumb things, anything to keep him tethered to the world. You're okay. You're gonna make it. What's your name? His hand gripped hers so tight she thought her fingers would snap. Minutes felt like hours until sirens approached, red lights painting the lot like a crime scene. A paramedic knelt beside her, took one look at the man, and said, "You might have just saved his life." Arya stepped back, her legs weak, her stomach empty, her hands stained with date and adrenaline. She didn't stay for thanks. She didn't ask his name. She just walked away into the cold, not knowing that tomorrow morning, the rumble of 100 engines would echo down her quiet street and change her life forever. 6 hours before that moment in the gas station, Arya sat cross-legged on the thin mattress on her floor, the morning light barely pushing through the taped-up window. Her apartment was more like a storage closet, cracked walls, a space heater that hissed louder than it worked, and a kitchen that held exactly 1 can of beans, half a bag of rice, and an empty egg carton she hadn't had the heart to throw out. The fridge hummed like it was trying to sound useful, but there was nothing for it to cool. On the counter sat a stack of unopened bills, each stamped with red ink warnings, and her old work shoes leaned against the door, soul-splitting, fabric worn thin, but still her only pair. She pulled on her hoodie, the one with the coffee stain across the hem and the stitched-up elbow, and quietly reached into her notebook. Before every shift, before facing the world, she wrote one thing she was grateful for. Today's note simply read, "Still breathing." Her job was 2 buses away, a diner that gave her fewer shifts since the manager learned her name used to be Mark. She didn't correct people anymore. She just kept her head down, took the late shifts no one wanted, smiled at rude customers, and stacked tips until her hands cramped. On good nights, she slept 6 hours. On bad ones, she cried herself quiet so the neighbors wouldn't complain. That $8, it wasn't just breakfast. It was warmth, comfort, maybe even hope for a few minutes. It was the illusion of normal. So when she later chose to let it go for someone who might never remember her face, it wasn't easy, it wasn't convenient, and it certainly wasn't logical. But it was human, and something inside her, something unbroken, even now, refused to look away. What she didn't know was that act would ripple far beyond that parking lot. Because by the next sunrise, the world she knew would crack wide open. Back in the gray light of the gas station lot, time slowed as Arya stood frozen, her breath catching as the massive man crumpled again, one knee buckling beneath him, his tattooed hand clutching at his chest with jerky desperation. His Harley leaned awkwardly on its side, chrome flashing in the gloom. A couple in a warm SUV stared for a moment and then pulled away. A man in line at the register muttered, "Leave it, girl. That's a Hell's Angel. Probably drunk or worse. You don't want trouble." Another voice chimed in, sharper, laced with something colder. "People like you shouldn't get involved." Arya flinched. The words weren't new. She'd heard them in stores, at job interviews, even once in a clinic when she was bleeding. Don't get involved. Don't draw attention. Don't exist too loudly. Her hands trembled as she held the aspirin and water, her feet planted between fear and mercy. He groaned again, this time softer, like the pain was stealing his breath. She saw his eyes flutter, panicked and lost. And in that moment, she was back on a park bench 3 winters ago, coughing blood into a napkin, people walking past, not one stopping. She remembered what it felt like to be left behind. So she knelt, gently lifted his head, helped him take the aspirin, let him squeeze her hand with a grip that said, "Don't leave me." The paramedics burst onto the scene minutes later. One knelt, checked his vitals, then looked at Arya and nodded with urgent respect. If you hadn't stepped in, he'd be dead, another finished. As they loaded the man into the ambulance, he tugged Arya close, his lips dry, whispering into her ear with barely enough breath, "Tell the club. Arya saved me." Then his hand dropped, and the doors slammed shut. Before Arya could even process what had just happened, a younger biker, maybe late 20s, eyes red with panic, raced into the lot, screeching his bike to a halt. He ran over, looking from her to the disappearing ambulance, then back to her again. "You helped him." She nodded. He said your name." The man stepped closer, pulling a worn card from his pocket. "A number. No name. Just digits. Call this tomorrow. Please. No matter what." Then he revved the bike and vanished. Arya stood there, the card shaking in her hand. She had no idea that she'd just touched the heart of something far bigger than she could imagine. The next morning arrived with a brittle silence, the kind that creeps in before bad news or unexpected change. Arya's phone buzzed early, and the moment she stepped out her door, she could feel it, the shift. The neighbor across the hall, usually too loud, fell awkwardly quiet as she passed. On the sidewalk, a woman stared a second too long, lips pursed, before dragging her child to the other side. Arya tried to shake it off, but as she neared the bus stop, she saw it on her screen. Someone had snapped a blurry photo of her kneeling beside the biker, posted it online with a mocking caption, "Even the angels need her now." Comments followed. Laughing emojis. Slurs hidden in sarcasm. She felt her breath tighten. At the diner, her manager pulled her aside. "Whatever that was last night," he said, "you should be careful. These people aren't safe." Arya didn't reply. She just tied on her apron and pushed through her shift, trying to ignore the buzzing in her pocket and the eyes that lingered too long. At lunch, she finally listened to the voicemail that had come in just before sunrise. A low, gravelly voice. "He made it. He's asking for you. Please, meet us. Today." No name. Just a plea. Still holding her phone, Arya glanced out the window and froze. Across the street, parked neatly beside a fire hydrant, sat 2 black motorcycles. Their riders didn't move, didn't approach. They just watched, not hostile, but not passive either. Silent guardians or silent warnings. She couldn't tell. Fear prickled up her spine, but there was something else too. Curiosity. That same whisper that told her to kneel beside a stranger now told her this wasn't over. Not yet. And when her shift ended, hands still shaking, Arya stepped outside, took a breath, and walked toward the waiting bikes. The bell above the diner door jingled as Arya stepped inside, and the moment it closed behind her, an eerie hush fell across the room. Every head turned. The entire place, packed wall to wall with leather jackets, patch-covered vests, long beards, and battle-scarred faces, fell silent. Forks stopped mid-air, mugs hovered inches from lips. And then, one by one, they rose. Not aggressively, not to intimidate. They stood, all of them, as if a queen had entered their chapel. Arya stopped in her tracks, confused, overwhelmed, uncertain whether to run or bow or cry. In the center of the diner sat the man she had saved, the one called Hawk. He looked different now, no longer gasping for life, but pale and bandaged, his oxygen tube still clipped to his nose, a nose hovering nearby. Yet when he saw her, his tired face lit up in a way that made the world feel still. "You came," he said softly, his voice thick with something ancient and wounded. He motioned for her to sit. Slowly, she approached. The others sat too, quietly, as if she were one of their own. Hawk's hands trembled slightly as he reached for hers across the table. "I need to tell you something," he began. "My daughter, her name was Lacey." His voice caught. She was beautiful, kind. She came out as trans when she was 17. And people turned away. Family, friends, strangers. She called me once from a payphone, crying. I was too late. She died that winter. Arya felt her chest collapse. Hawk continued, tears slipping down his weathered cheeks. "I made a vow that day, that no one like her would ever be alone again if I could help it. We built something, a network, shelters, safe rides, scholarships, food banks, quiet help where the system failed." His eyes met hers, full of grief and awe. "When you saved me, you didn't just save a man. You honored her memory." He gently placed something in her hand, a silver pin shaped like a phoenix. "This belonged to her. Now it belongs to you." Arya was speechless, her world spinning with the weight of what she'd just stepped into. Hawk looked at her, serious now. "Tomorrow morning, everything changes. Don't be afraid." Then he smiled, just barely. "You have more family now than you can count." But Arya still didn't know what that meant. Not yet. Arya woke to the sound of thunder, not from the sky, but from the street, low, rolling, unrelenting. At first, she thought it was a dream, some leftover pulse of fear echoing from the night before. But when she peeled back the curtain of her tiny window, her breath caught. Her entire block was filled, shoulder to shoulder, with motorcycles, lined like a battalion, gleaming chrome, leather, flags, and silence. Not a riot, not chaos, just presence. 100 engines idling low, as if waiting for something sacred. Her neighbors peeked through blinds, stepped onto porches, clutched bathrobes and phones. One woman muttered, "What did she do?" Another man shouted, "You brought this danger here." Police cruisers rolled in, slow and tense. Arya stood in the doorway of her apartment building, paralyzed. Her heart pounded. She felt like the target again, the outsider, the mistake. But then, from the front of the pack, Hawk stepped off his bike. Cleaned up, steady. He held up both hands, and the engines died. "Everyone listen," he said, his voice loud enough to touch every doorstep. "You don't know her story. You don't know mine." He looked directly at Arya. "She saved my life. When everyone else turned away, she knelt on concrete and stayed. She did for me what the world refused to do for my daughter, and I won't let her stand alone anymore." One by one, the bikers moved forward. A woman placed bags of groceries at Arya's feet. A tall man handed over a toolkit and said, "We fix your heater," and the door lock. Another rolled up a clean mattress. Someone else gave her a folder, job offer, full salary, health care, at Hawk's nonprofit. And then came the final paper, trembling in Hawk's hand, Arya Foundation Scholarship for Courageous Trans Youth. Her name, in bold, printed as legacy, as truth. Arya dropped to her knees, overwhelmed, tears falling fast and silent. The same neighbors who had muttered yesterday now stepped forward, one by one. An elderly woman said, "I was wrong." A teenager hugged her. A man who once avoided her eyes whispered, "Thank you." Hawk knelt beside her, his voice gentle now. "You saw my humanity when everyone else saw danger. Today, we see yours. All of it. Fully." And in that moment, surrounded by steel, thunder, strangers turned family, Arya wasn't invisible. She wasn't a risk. She was the reason they all showed up. Months passed, and the noise faded. Not the roar of motorcycles, but the noise inside Arya's mind. The fear, the doubt, the endless loop of am I safe? Am I enough? Now she sat in a sunlit office filled with voices, young ones, scared ones, honest ones, who came to her for guidance, for shelter, for hope. She helped them fill out forms, find doctors, land jobs, rebuild lives. Her own pain had become a map, her survival, a torch. Every backpack she handed out, every phone call she answered, every story she heard made her mission louder. No one gets left behind. One quiet evening, she returned to the place where it all began, that cracked concrete outside the gas station. She brought with her a tiny plaque, no bigger than a license plate, and placed it near the curb, where the light still flickered overhead. It read, A small act of courage changed everything. She stood back, took a breath, and smiled. Then she turned to us, to you, and asked, Who have you judged unfairly? Who's standing in silence, waiting for a small kindness? Who needs your last $8? Not in money, but in compassion. You might not have 100 bikers behind you, but you have one thing more powerful than all of them: the choice to help, to see someone, to show up, be someone's Arya. Share this story. Leave a comment about someone who once changed your life. And before the day ends, find someone to stand beside, even if it costs you. Especially then.